Consider Tyrannosaurus rex for a moment, not as an icon, but as a biological system. Around 5,400 kilograms, roughly 12,000 pounds, of muscle, bone, and neurological precision. A bite force measured at approximately 57,000 newtons, roughly equivalent to a mid-size construction excavator closing its bucket. Every feature of that animal is optimized for a single outcome: closing the distance and ending a life. Now consider an animal that shared its ecosystem with the Asian ecological equivalent of T-Rex, outweighed it, could not outrun it, and was never, in the excavated fossil record, successfully hunted by it. It had solved the problem of survival by making aggression mathematically irrational. The natural world has produced two answers to the problem of being large and slow. The first is armor: shells, plates, osteoderms. The second has only been successfully deployed once in the 500 million year history of vertebrate life at this scale. A solution so precisely matched to its environment that evolution has arrived at versions of it 3 separate times, on 3 separate continents, across 70 million years of independent experimentation.
This is Therizinosaurus cheloniformis, the scythe lizard. And before we are finished, the biology will be considerably stranger than the name. To understand what forced this animal into existence, you need to understand a disruption so fundamental it rewrote the competitive rules of every terrestrial ecosystem on Earth: the angiosperm revolution. For the first 200 million years of the dinosaurs' reign, the world's forests were dominated by ferns, cycads, and conifers, nutritious but low-growing and broadly accessible. Then, beginning roughly 100 million years ago, flowering plants began their global takeover. The canopy grew taller, leaves became more calorie-dense, and the most productive food sources on land migrated upward into high reaches that smaller animals physically could not access. Evolution abhors an untapped resource. The ancestors of Therizinosaurus were theropod carnivores, the same broad family that produced Velociraptor, Spinosaurus, and every modern bird alive today. Somewhere between 120 and 100 million years ago, one branch of that lineage stopped hunting. Over subsequent tens of millions of years, it grew, it stretched, its arms lengthened, its digestive system reorganized entirely around plant matter. What the forest had placed out of reach, this animal made reachable through sheer accumulated scale. By 70 million years ago, the fossil record preserves this: an animal approximately 9 meters, roughly 30 feet in length, standing between 5 and 6 meters, around 16 to 20 feet at the hip, carrying a body mass somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 kilograms, roughly 11,000 to 13,000 pounds. That is the mass of a large African bull elephant, distributed across a frame standing nearly twice as tall.
What is today the Gobi Desert of Mongolia was 70 million years ago a subtropical river delta under an atmosphere holding 2 to 3 times today's CO2, dense, layered forest, seasonal flooding, an effectively unlimited supply of the most calorie-dense vegetation on Earth, positioned precisely at the heights only extreme scale could reach.
The answer is metabolic cost. Maintaining a body of 5,500 kilograms, roughly 12,000 pounds, requires an estimated 230 to 320 kilograms, around 500 to 700 pounds of vegetation per day. That is the weight of a concert grand piano, consumed every single day just to remain metabolically solvent. That threshold is not negotiable. Failing to meet it does not mean hunger.
It means organ failure within days. An animal of this scale carries no margin for error whatsoever. The largest feathered animal in Earth's history didn't evolve to be impressive. It evolved because the alternative was starvation.
When the first Therizinosaurus fossils were recovered in Mongolia in 1948, the paleontologists examining them didn't recognize what they were looking at. The arm bones were so architecturally unlike anything in the known theropod record that the scientific community classified them as belonging to a giant turtle. That misidentification held in the published literature for nearly 30 years. The species name reflects it. Cheloniformis means turtle-shaped. The lineage that produced Velociraptor, a two-legged, binocular-visioned pursuit predator, generated through approximately 50 million years of evolutionary divergence something so structurally alien that trained anatomists with physical specimens in hand reached for the wrong animal entirely.
In evolutionary biology, this is called an ecomorphological shift, a wholesale redesign of body plan driven by a change in ecological role. The Therizinosaurs didn't slowly drift toward herbivory.
The fossil record suggests a relatively rapid transition in geological terms, followed by tens of millions of years of increasingly extreme refinement.
They didn't modify a predator. They rebuilt one from the skeleton outward. This animal wasn't a failed carnivore. It was a carnivore that found a better job.
The lineage that turned a predator into a harvester wasn't the only time evolution answered scarcity by reaching upward. When the forests thinned and the ground went bare, another giant rose into the canopy, built not for speed or combat, but for height alone. Its disappearance hinges on a single unresolved calculation the next investigation finally makes clear. Like this investigation to keep the current chapter open, and subscribe so the next revelation arrives the moment the canopy shifts again.
Before discussing what Therizinosaurus could do, it is necessary to understand what it had permanently given up. Plant matter is metabolically expensive to process. A carnivore digests meat efficiently. Cellulose, the structural material of plant cell walls, requires fermentation, long, slow microbial breakdown in dedicated intestinal chambers. The larger the body, the greater the volume of fermenting material that must be carried at any given moment.
The pelvis of Therizinosaurus shows it. Wide, deep, and unlike any other large theropod in the fossil record, built to house a fermentation system on a scale no pursuit predator could accommodate. That pelvis is also why Therizinosaurus could not run. Center of gravity too high, body too wide, frame built for load-bearing rather than dynamic movement. Hind limb proportions place it firmly in the slow mover category. It could not escape, so it had to become something that didn't need to. The forelimbs of Therizinosaurus are proportionally longer than those of almost any other theropod recovered. The humerus alone measured close to 90 centimeters, the length of an acoustic guitar, with the full arm reaching approximately 2.4 meters before the claws begin. The muscle scarring on those bones reveals the function, not the striking capability of a predator, but the sustained, high-torque pull of an animal designed to hook and draw down branches weighing hundreds of pounds. Reach, hook, pull, strip, repeat. 500 kilograms of vegetation a day processed through that sequence. Here is the assumption almost every viewer carries out of any Jurassic World film. Those claws are weapons. Not according to the biomechanics. The wrist joint is not built for a lateral slashing arc, the motion of an offensive weapon. It's built for a downward pulling arc, the motion of harvesting. The curvature maximizes grip on a cylindrical branch, not penetration of soft tissue.
They are not swords. They are combine harvesters. And the claws were not solid bone. They were bone cores sheathed in keratin, the same protein that forms fingernails and rhinoceros horns. A 2014 analysis in the Journal of Anatomy found the living claw was meaningfully larger than the fossil alone suggests. The 90-centimeter measurement is a floor, not a ceiling.
Bapiosaurus, a smaller therizinosaur from China's Yikshen Formation, was preserved with feather impressions, and Falcarius corroborates it. Therizinosaurs retained the feathering of their coelurosaur ancestors, modified for insulation, display, and, in juveniles, likely camouflage. At the scale of Therizinosaurus, those feathers would not have been elegant plumage. The closest modern analog is a cassowary, coarse, bristled, filamentous covering pressed against dense muscle. Not soft, not ornamental, functional and strange. What moved through the Nemegt forest was a 6-ton feathered giant, unlike anything its predators had evolutionary precedent for reading. The claws were never weapons. They were the reason no one ever got close enough to know that.
Every ecological system generates a pressure test, a moment when the question, does this strategy actually work, receives its answer in the most direct terms available. For Therizinosaurus, that test had a name: Tarbosaurus batar, the Asian ecological equivalent of Tyrannosaurus rex, approximately 12 meters, roughly 40 feet in length, a body mass approaching 5,500 kilograms, around 12,000 pounds, a bite force estimated at approximately 70,000 newtons, roughly equivalent to 4 fully loaded cement trucks bearing down simultaneously on a surface the size of a dinner plate. In the Nemegt Formation ecosystem of late Cretaceous Mongolia, Tarbosaurus occupied the uncontested apex of the food chain. With one exception, it apparently decided, repeatedly, not to test. Therizinosaurus turns to face an approaching Tarbosaurus and extends its forelimbs. Claw tip to claw tip, that extension spans approximately 6 meters, roughly 20 feet, the wingspan of a small commercial aircraft. Those claws are not raised overhead in a defensive guard. They are extended forward and outward, positioned at approximately the eye level of an approaching Tarbosaurus, the precise configuration to deliver a downward raking arc across the face and forelimbs at the first moment of contact.
Apply the biomechanics established earlier. Pulling force and striking force recruit the same muscle groups. The difference is directional. A full force downward arc from a forelimb built to drag down branches weighing hundreds of pounds would concentrate through a keratin spike, roughly 1 meter, onto an impact surface the size of a human palm. The medieval parallel is not imprecise. This is a halberd fixed to a 6-ton animal that cannot be knocked down. Tarbosaurus had the neurological architecture to assess risk before committing. And every variable in this encounter, the reach differential, the mass, the defensive geometry, the catastrophic physical cost of a failed approach, resolved in the same direction. The predator turned and walked away. The fossil record for Therizinosaurus itself remains fragmentary, but the evidence from closely related genera is directional. Falcarius fossil sites in Utah contain multiple individuals of varying ages at the same location. The interpretation most consistent with the taphonomic evidence is at least seasonal gregariousness, possibly multi-generational grouping. Model the defensive geometry for a group of 3 or 4 Therizinosaurus individuals. Arms extended, bodies turned broadside. A combined display spanning approximately 18 meters, roughly 60 feet of weaponized reach. Combined mass approaching 22,000 kilograms, around 40 tons, bearing low-frequency vocalizations that register in the chest before they register in the ear.
the cost-benefit calculation for Tarbosaurus does not improve. The Therizinosaurs radiated across Asia and into North America over more than 50 million years. The strategy, extreme scale, weaponized reach, deterrence over aggression, was a planetary pattern, not a regional experiment. 70 million years of consistent fossil evidence pointing in one direction. The predator always walked away.
66 million years ago, a bolide roughly 10 kilometers across struck what is today the Yucatan Peninsula at around 20 kilometers per second, releasing energy equivalent to roughly 100 teratons of TNT, some 6 billion times the Hiroshima bomb. The immediate effect was regional obliteration. The medium-term effect was global. A debris cloud that reduced incoming sunlight to near zero within weeks and dropped temperatures an estimated 15 degrees Celsius within months. Photosynthesis stopped. For an animal requiring 230 to 320 kilograms of living vegetation per day, this was not a slow crisis. The canopy Therizinosaurus had spent 70 million years calibrating its anatomy to access simply ceased to exist within a single season.
It could not substitute, could not shift strategy, could not wait. The budget became unsolvable in weeks. The largest feathered animal in the history of life on Earth was among the first of the megafauna to starve. Every non-avian dinosaur perished. Every lineage, every strategy built for the world as it had been. But the theropod lineage had one move remaining. Modern birds are not the descendants of dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs, a lineage of small, feathered coilosaurs that survived the KPG boundary through small body mass, dietary generalism, and the ability to exploit a stripped-down post-impact world that larger specialists could not. The non-avian dinosaurs didn't simply go extinct. The lineages too large, too specialized, or too committed to the pre-impact ecosystem did. One branch, small and energetically modest, did not. That branch is every bird alive today. Consider the alternative. If the bolide had missed, Therizinosaurus does not die. It continues, refines, grows larger still. With no fossil evidence, early mammals could have competed with an established population for that vertical space. The cassowary would not exist, nor would the giant ground sloths. The asteroid didn't just end a species. It ended a monopoly on a solution. Consider the cassowary, a flightless bird roughly 1.5 meters tall, native to northern Australia and New Guinea, documented as the most physically dangerous bird alive. Its inner toe carries a claw around 12 centimeters long, and its threat response is not flight. It's a held position, wings extended, body turned to maximize apparent size, waiting for the calculation to resolve. It's an independent solution to the same problem, produced by the same family of organisms at a radically smaller scale. The giant ground sloths, extinct in the Americas only around 10,000 years ago, grew to roughly 6,000 kilograms and fed by hooking down branches with elongated forelimbs. The chalicotheres, knuckle-walking perissodactyls of the Miocene, developed that same architecture for the same high canopy feeding ecology. 3 unrelated lineages, 3 continents, 3 independent experiments spanning 70 million years. One answer. What biologists call a stable attractor. A body plan so precisely matched to a recurring ecological opportunity that natural selection, given enough time and a tall enough canopy, drives toward it independently across vast phylogenetic distances. Evolution doesn't invent freely. It searches a solution space defined by physics, chemistry, and available calories, and finds the same answers
from different starting points across geological time. Therizinosaurus was not an accident. It was a destination. The natural world, given the right conditions, builds it again. The blueprint survived the asteroid. It just got smaller.
Something is still moving through the canopy. Not hunting, not fleeing, reaching. You can see it now, but the posture is the same as it always was. The scale changed. The problem didn't. Neither did the answer. That specific unease you feel at a cassowary's stillness, the sense that the bird is doing the assessing, not you, is 70 million years of refinement operating exactly as designed. You weren't watching a bird hold its ground. You were watching the same logic that made Tarbosaurus turn around and walk away, compressed, filtered, and delivered through 130 pounds of living mathematics. The largest feathered predator deterrent in the history of vertebrate life is gone. What remains is the proof that the strategy worked. You don't hear it roar. You hear it wait.